Got the recording going. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. This is session 3 in our Noble webinar series, Preparing Students for the Global Workplace. The Noble group is sponsored by University of Florida Center for Latin American Studies and the UF Cyber. And I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the camcorder for the moment just to make sure we don't lose band with too much. Oh, Anne's arrived. Hello, welcome Annie. Thanks for coming. All right, so far we determined everyone can hear, everybody sees the chat box. My little welcome wordle for tradition. And introduction. So I'm Mary Reisner. I think I know some of you through Twitter and other social media means. So I'll be our host interviewing our guest tonight. And our guest is Darcy Lear, who is career coach and also lecturer at University of Chicago, previously Spanish professor at UNC Chapel Hill, right? Was it UNC Chapel Hill? Okay. All right, so before we go on kind of what we're going to talk about tonight, can everyone type in where you are from in the chat box? Oh, wow, Colombia. Margaret. Oh, right, Martha's from Crystal River. Okay, great. Okay, so Anna, how did you hear about the webinar all the way in Colombia? I'm curious. Okay, she's still typing. Anyways, well, we're glad to have you here. So that's nice to get somebody from out of the country. If we could put little stars on the map, we could at least have a star outside of the U.S. Chair of the Spanish Department. Oh, okay, great. I wonder what list you were included in. All right. So, anyways, welcome to everyone. And what are okay, so you heard about it from internet. Yeah, I think we're following each other on Twitter now. So I'm glad that you joined us. Putting a little commercial real quick before we start about Noble and visiting the website for resources. We have advocacy materials for promoting foreign language study for careers. We have information of how you can work on developing a program at your school, either at the university or K through 12 level. And we also have resources by different languages, and we're always adding as people contribute things or as I find things on the internet to put there. How can you collaborate, get more involved? Like us on Facebook, that we have a LinkedIn group. I'm on Twitter at Languages for Careers, and I would love to hear suggestions on other webinar topics or other guest experts that we can invite. Getting more involved also is if you let me know the kind of work that you're doing, I can try to see if how you can get involved and how I can get you at conferences to present and get your ideas and work out for others to learn from. Upcoming webinars, you can find these on the website. The next one will be February 11th with Leslie Foreman, who's down in Chile, talking about ways to build your career working abroad if you're interested in that. Medical Spanish coming up, and then using using case studies in the business language classroom with some professors from George Washington University. So now one more with coming up with Danica also. We just haven't set the date on that one yet, and we're open for other topics and speaker suggestions. Now, So I'll leave the contact information up there and we'll go ahead and get started talking to Darcy about our topic tonight of how students can highlight their foreign language skills in the job search, how they can highlight them or leverage these skills. So, Darcy, can you tell us a little bit about the goals of your coaching sessions that you offer?
Sure. I train foreign language students to highlight their linguistic and culture skills in their job search documents, professional school applications, and interview preparation so that they're the standout candidates in really competitive job markets.
Okay. Um, just to let Margarita know. And throughout the session, please feel free to type in things in the chat and we can go back and check on those questions. Okay, and so Darcy, what brought you to this stage to start this kind of coaching? What did you find in your teaching at UNC and other places?
At UNC, to
What?
provide a little context, at UNC Chapel Hill, I was coordinating a minor program that was specifically Spanish for the professions, and I had a lot of control there to design courses and tweak it, and students had, like I'm sure everyone's students participating tonight, they had these amazing, rich experiences with study abroad, with community service learning, with their courses. We had a course that was about community and professional development. And then when I saw their resumes, often when they were asking for a letter of recommendation after the courses with me, they would have all of that represented in one word, Spanish. And usually at the bottom of the resume, like as an afterthought in the skills section. And at some point I could see that the university might not be the place or the right time for the kinds of training that I now do, because students often need it in English because they're job searching in English to work in the U.S. But they need help highlighting, showing how they use their language and culture skills throughout their resume and other job search materials.
Okay, and who is your target audience when you're working with these services? Who are you reaching out to connect with?
I have 3 or 4 main groups. My target audience is young majors or minors in languages. And so I usually get those private clients sometime shortly after graduation when they're frustrated with the job search. And usually they just need minor tweaking. They need to understand that they really have to customize their job search materials to match the job ad, or that they need to be talking a lot more about them, the employers and the company and the industry, and less about themselves. So those little tweaking. So that's my first group, is young language majors. And the second group is language departments who are feeling the pressure from administration above and from students and parents to provide some practical professional training. And so I travel. This year I've traveled a lot. In the fall, I went to 7 campuses in 5 states to do job search workshops for foreign language students. And next week I start traveling again for the spring semester. And then the third group is mid-career people who are really trying to translate like one career for a second career. So it's surprisingly similar to the work I'm doing with the language students.
Okay, and you mentioned going to campuses. Have those all been university campuses? Is there, I mean, have you done anything with K through 12 schools?
I
Or
have
are you
not
just,
done anything K through 12. I've done small private student-centered universities all the way up to Northwestern and Brown Ivy Leagues, big state universities, but I haven't done any K through 12 yet.
uh-huh. But I would think that a lot of the stuff that you're talking about can be passed on to a K through 12 group.
I think so. And if we get to the point soon where we talk about the specific things that I'm suggesting, for example, when I work with graduate students on their CVs and how they can provide professional development training to their undergraduate students and then use that in their own job searches, those kinds of things that you can weave through the curriculum, practical professional development skills are the same things that high schools are using, middle schools are using in their language curricula.
Okay. Um, so before we go too much into what some of the activities and tips that you have are, um, what could you say in general that you find employers are looking for in new college grads?
And I think those studies have really been done. Lots of surveys have come in, and they know new grads aren't going to have the 3 to 5 years experience in whatever field or industry like I would see with mid-career clients. So what they're looking for in new hires who are recent grads are things like good written and verbal communication skills, problem solving skills, decision making, ability to analyze and synthesize, leadership, teamwork, and it even comes up an ability to behave appropriately with people from different cultures in a variety of contexts, which is exactly what we're doing as language instructors. But the problem with some of those other things like problem solving, decision making, communication, analysis is what we mean in the university by those things and what is meant in the professional workplace by those same terms are often quite different.
I agree. I think we're using different terms and coming from such different contexts that sometimes that
Well, we're
what we
using
need to
the
be doing gets
same
lost.
terms. We're using the same terms, but for example, in the university context, we would see that list of characteristics that employers want and say, check, 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 check. Our students do midterm and final written reports. They do midterm and final oral exams. They take the frameworks that we study in class and analyze the literature that they're reading. They can organize their thoughts into an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And that's sort of the academic interpretation of those terms. And then we use the same terms in the professional world, but what the employers mean is, can you send an email that contains all the information that everyone needs without a bunch of back and forth to clarify? And can you make the decisions about the font and the word count and the margins all by yourself? And in the
Hmm.
university, I think we inadvertently encourage students to ask, like, how many words should it be? What font should it be? And I think that's where that clash comes in that I was unable to resolve from within the university.
Huh, okay. Um, and so you listed quite a few skills in general, but how do you see employers looking at the value of foreign language?
Well, and I think if you just list it, nobody knows what the value is.
Uh-huh.
So you need to say the employer is looking for this ability to be comfortable in a variety of situations with people from different cultures. Maybe what should be on your resume is the fact that you've lived abroad in a large city with a mass transit system and you figured out how to use that system, including how to do a workaround when there's construction or delays. And then you've used that knowledge to help your peers, your family who's visiting, whoever navigate the city. That specific example that a student could put on their resume illustrates a lot of these characteristics that employers are looking for. But you have to say
Uh-huh.
that. You have to say that in a cover letter or a personal statement or an interview. Say, when I was in Berlin, I learned this skill of navigating the transportation. And so from that, I understand now that I'm comfortable in new environments, that I can solve problems, that I'm calm under pressure when there's a unexpected change. And in your company, now you know you can send me on business trips and I will be fine. I won't melt down and get homesick. I won't go nuts and party and be late and hungover for the meetings. That's an example. That's just one example.
Right, right. Uh-huh. Yeah, because if you can accomplish some of these things while you're abroad, yeah, that definitely builds up a different skill set than doing those kind of things in your own culture. You definitely have to meet more challenges. Um,
And that's just one
so,
example. You could use a course, just a piece of coursework you could put on your resume instead of the word Spanish. You can say, as part of a team of 4, I designed the political implications section of a written report and a verbal presentation about the niminoristas, the young unemployed or underemployed workers in Spain. And that shows a lot of these traits that then later, again, in a cover letter or an interview, you can explicitly say, here are the traits I've developed as a result of that project, and here's how I will bring them to bear for you in your.
okay, so you're having people, even if they say have a e-portfolio of different projects and things that they've done through their coursework, they're going one step beyond that, saying these are the skills that came out of this activity.
You have to package it for employers. You can't say, here's a link with my e-portfolio. Have fun looking through it and discerning yourselves from that what I gained. You have to package it
Right.
in the form that the employers are looking for. First a resume line, maybe a cover letter paragraph if it matches the job ad, and maybe in an answer to an interview question.
Okay, and so how do you, when you're meeting on campuses, how how do you give these kind of examples? Like, say we throw out some kind of project-based learning, or say some of the projects I know that Annie does with her service learning classes. How do you take students through the steps of, like, here, this is the project you did. How do you market this to the employer? Can you kind of like walk us through that?
So students you can usually sort of basically describe a project. So I did a service learning class and I answered the phone at the refugee center, or I made a pamphlet for the rape crisis center. And then what I do in these workshops, campus workshops, is walk through students through, like, how can you move from this sort of bland description? Usually students' first draft, they use words like, I helped in an after-school program. So I say, okay, use
Mm-hmm.
strong verbs, describe what you really did there, right? Did you design and distribute a pamphlet? That's much better than made a pamphlet or helped. Then
Uh-huh.
I ask them to add quantifiable information everywhere they can. Over what period of time, for how long, how many people were affected, how many students did you work with, what were their ages, any kind of quantifiable information that you can possibly put in there. So that you would say, for example, with the pamphlets, I would say, designed 3 pamphlets about domestic violence prevention and distributed them to 25 social service agencies in the local community. And that would show an employer, and again, the student would want to explicitly say to the employer in a cover letter, personal statement, or interview, right? I didn't do what most students do, which is write up the content of the pamphlet and then leave it on the community partner's desk at the end of the semester. And then someone else has to proofread it and format it and get it printed and distribute it to all the local agencies. I did all of that too. And you see that in the resume line with just the few words of and distributed to 25 local agencies. And those few words show that you're the kind of person who really does finish projects.
Right. Yeah, and well, that's interesting because I I think in the business school, students are just automatically trained to present their resume and their CV in this kind of format. So it's almost kind of transferring those kind of skills to the liberal arts college, because I guess up to this point, there just hasn't been that focus or that need to
Maybe, but I
show.
will say my students who were in the business school at UNC still didn't know how to represent their language and culture studies very well in any of their job search materials. They knew how to
Oh, okay, okay.
do school stuff.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I did send a message to some of the people in the College of Business that I work with. I did send them the link about tonight, hoping that they would sit in, because I'm guessing that even their business majors um, aren't highlighting these skills as well either. You know, they might be emphasizing all the technical skills, but not necessarily these soft skills, and that gives them the competitive advantage, even if they have the business degree.
Well, and that's it. That's how you're the standout candidate in the competitive job market. You're the candidate who has the same business degree as everyone else, and the one who has the language degree, and the one who can articulate why your language degree makes you the standout candidate, right? Because you were able to take phone messages in a language other than your native language. You are able to, all of these different examples I've given.
Uh-huh. Okay, and so I guess from here, maybe we could start with just some ideas of types of activities that session attendees could try to integrate into their courses to give to their students to kind of start practicing and developing these kind of skills as they write their CVs. Because I know a lot of foreign language classes, that's like a big assignment, is like, oh, we're going to do your resume in a foreign language. Well, that really isn't necessarily the shift where, that's not really where we need to be
You don't
going.
need your resume. You don't need a Spanish resume with your picture and marital status on it in Spanish. Most students don't. Most students need it in English for their job search here in the U.S. and need to know how to highlight their language and culture skills.
Exactly.
But Mary, in
So,
terms of
hello?
the curriculum, you want me to
Rose?
talk about that now?
Yeah, some kind of, sorry, I thought I
Yes.
lost you for a minute. Yeah, just to give some ideas for people what they can do in their classroom to kind of help students to start thinking in that direction.
Right. So, and Ann Abbott, who's attending the webinar now, and I are both working on an article now where we talk about sort of the move away from languages for specific purposes as Spanish for business, Spanish for medicine. And I think this is the third webinar in the series, and I think it's come up in every single one that model may not be the best one, and that what we need is some other sort of foundational, fundamental skills training for our students that provides them with the strategies that they'll need and have in the future when they know the specific vocabulary or grammar that they need to acquire, right? So like medical Spanish, it's okay as a sort of vocabulary based course, but it can't possibly prepare you for your career in oncology or your future career in orthopedic surgery or whatever those really specific things are. So we're trying to sort of shift it back towards some fundamental skills. So for example,
Mm-hmm.
networking. You have to know how to interact with people socially but professionally in a way that makes a good impression. So that means you need to learn names, you need to remember names, you need to use people's names, right? And we do that all the time in our language classes. We just need to layer on the explicit note that is networking training, that is professional development training, that you'll get the job over the candidate who doesn't bother to use any names in the interview or remember any names during and after the interview and the thank you note follow-ups. You need to know
Uh-huh.
about body language and Students don't use great body language in class sometimes. So you can take these moments when you're doing a think, pair, share or pair and group work every time to say, make sure you know everyone's name, make sure you're using the names, make sure you're finding them out if you don't remember them in the target language. Make eye contact. Offer your hand to shake with a medium firm grip and not a loose limp grip, not a vice grip. Have friendly body language, right? Don't smile like a crazed lunatic, but smile. Don't cross your arms. Be aware of your body language that's problematic and work on controlling it in the safe environment of the classroom where you can really polish those skills before the high stakes environment of the workplace. So there's one easy thing that you can do that you're probably doing some of that already, but you're not calling it networking. You're not calling it professional preparation. And you probably, could be and should be.
Yeah, and I do think a lot of things that we just suppose kids know nowadays that maybe traditionally were, because society just did seem to be more formal. We've just gotten more informal with social media and everything, and I think students forget that you still have to separate contexts,
Right,
depending on who you're with, and we forget to emphasize that.
right.
And
And the other element that I would put in with networking is being a good listener. People like to talk about themselves, and I think this is what I run into with my young clients all the time. They want, it's like, me, hear about me, here's why I'm so great, here's why I'm perfect for the job, but you need to make it like, you company, you candidate, what do you need? Listen, or just people in general when you encounter them in an interview situation. Ask them about themselves, listen, and try to control talking about yourself. Have tight, little, clear, concise things about yourself. And I think students today, the millennials we call them, are pretty famous for not being great about listening and expressing an interest in others, at least stereotypically.
right.
They're not that way. So networking is a great way. Any kind of presentations, I think every presentation ever made, I don't care if it's K to 12, post-secondary, should be practiced for a job interview. And so any questions about the presentation, you run through this filter. Would you do that in a job interview? Right? So can we have note cards? I don't know. Would you take note cards to a job interview? I hope not. And I actually have a rubric that makes that part of the grade because, of course, making the passion that you would have and the interest that you would have in an interview context can be hard in the classroom context. But I try to layer that in with students. This is your low stakes opportunity to practice for your job interview, to give a presentation that is polished and practiced yet seems spontaneous and off the cuff, which is exactly what an interview has to be. So you have to
Uh-huh.
really prepare your presentations and really own them.
Yeah, and I would say, I know it here at UF, they finally have started doing mock interviews like that, even for foreign language students before they go to the MLA conference. So that's definitely a plus just to get you prepared.
But you should be prepared long before you're on your way to MLA. You know what I mean? You should have been doing that all through your college career. And you don't need your professors to tell you that. You don't need your B school mentors to tell you that. You can just, as the student, treat every presentation as if it were preparation for
But I'm saying even just mock interviews to kind of put you in that situation, especially if you've never gone on a job interview
of course.
before. I think that's, just good practice.
Yes, absolutely. And if we're weaving this into our language curricula, our students are going to excel in those mock interviews over everyone else who hasn't already been being explicitly told in their classes, like we will be telling them in our language classes, The reason I'm making you practice and prepare and not use note cards is so you will be relaxed and comfortable and polished and prepared in your job, unlike everyone else who's just getting started at the mock stage.
Right. Um, so any other kind of activities, other things that would work at both levels? Because I know we have K through, I think we might have more K through 12 than post-secondary tonight.
Okay, here's a really good example then. I feel like letters and numbers are treated at the post-secondary level. They're treated sort of in chapter 1, first week of Spanish 101, and then kind of left in the dust. But those building blocks, if you explicitly work with them in this way, can give you the skills to take a phone message. And if you can take a phone message in the target language, that gives the caller access to the organization that they would otherwise be being passively denied by no one being able to communicate with them. So even if all you can do is take a name and number and say someone will call you back, at least that person hasn't been passively turned away. But we rarely package those building blocks, numbers and letters, as taking phone messages and telling students explicitly, this is a skill that will help you in your professional career. But you need to layer on strategies here too. And this is one of the big things that I think we need to use when we rethink what do we mean by languages for specific purposes, right? We need to equip our students with language learning strategies that makes them lifelong learners way beyond our classroom because they'll know how to acquire what they need. So with the example of phone messages, of course, we all get scared taking a phone message. You don't have the visual cues you normally get. You need to train them with the strategies to take control of the conversation, to say things like, one number at a time, one letter at a time. I'm going to read that back to you. Or, I got DAR. What are the last two letters of your name, Darcy? These things that put you in control and allow you to ultimately get the message that you need down, instead of what everybody would instinctively do, including our advanced students who are graduating and have finished their majors. They would say, what? Repeat, please, repeat. These global requests for global repetition. And we're never giving them the strategies to break down the communication into, doable chunks, take control of the conversation in that way. And we're probably not explicitly telling them, this is a skill that you can promote in your job search materials. You can tell people that you know how to take a solid phone message in that target language, and that you therefore can be a gatekeeper for all the speakers of that language who want to communicate with the organization.
Yeah, and I think those kind of tasks are key, even though people would say, oh, well, that's just beginner language. I think that's been kind of an issue with medical language, business language, because everybody's like, oh, you start at the intermediate level and above, and it's, college prep people, assuming everyone's going to go in and be doing huge executive type skills, but you have to advance for just the basic communication skills to work your way up to executive level decision making in the language.
Well, and what we find with languages is, well, it's a lifelong endeavor. And we know this because university departments across the country have the same problem, which is, why are students coming to the minor and major courses without being fluent native-like Spanish speakers? Well, we know why, because they're language learners. And most departments have put in these bridge courses where it's introduction to literature, advanced grammar, composition and conversation, some sort of bridge that's supposed to then solve the problem of basic language isn't making people fluent speakers, right? And what we see in service learning is we're We're sending them into the community to help, to be supportive of these organizations that need the language, the linguistic and culture skills that our students have. And sometimes they're missing those basics. They freak out on a phone call, and your community partner, who you've said the students can help, shows you this message pad with 6 digits and like Marie with a question mark. That's not a phone message. You can't use that. And
Right.
sometimes organizations now, especially the older generation running organizations, they want to use social media marketing to reach their clients in any language. Can your students write 140 characters that are error-free in the target language? Like, that's a great practical way to weave these real-world professional skills into your course. Practice writing 140 characters, which is the Twitter maximum. It's entirely accurate. Everything's spelled correctly. All the grammar is good. You could promote yourself as a social media marketer in Spanish. If we were working with students to develop the basics, just always consistently get 140 characters right. We're moving so fast that sometimes the fundamental skills aren't getting covered. And those are precisely the skills that are probably most valuable to employers.
Well, exactly. And that's where, yeah, I've always argued that you've got to get the beginning abilities strong before we rush forward into past subjunctive, because we haven't achieved anything if that's what we're doing. But
And I
so
think,
that's great. I'm glad you and Ann are getting an article to document this and get people to think about it a little better.
and I don't advocate uprooting the curriculum. I think that's an exercise in frustration. But I think individual instructors can weave these things in without uprooting the curriculum. So I'm not going to try to argue with how subjunctive is taught too early. I agree with you, Mary. But I think
Oh
while
yeah,
I'm
no,
teaching,
and I'm not suggesting that either. Yeah, we'd be decades waiting.
yeah. But right now, we can go ahead and while we're teaching subjunctive and they're getting into the groups, remind them that they're explicitly working on the professional skill of networking. At the end of each unit, you can have them work on a tweet, work on a Facebook post, work on their own resume line. How would you represent this project that we just did in class on your resume? Do you use strong verbs? Do you have quantifiable information? When you get to the interview, can you then say what you learned from this experience and how you will use it to benefit this organization that you're interviewing with? We can tack these things on and weave them through the already existing curricula.
Okay, actually, Anne made a suggestion earlier in the chat box. If you could give us an example of a student resume that you helped improved, what kind of things might have been missing? How did you get them to improve it?
Oh yeah, I did a screencast blog post with one of these just a couple weeks ago. It was a student who had helped in an after-school program, and so she'd used a lot of complete sentences. It looked like she hadn't even been to career services to sort of get the general basics down. But she said, her resume said something like, helped with all child-related activities in an after-school program. So, well, what did you really do, right? How did you help? List the actual actions. It's better to say served lunch or cleaned up after lunch than to just use this generic word helped that doesn't mean anything. So what were the child related activities? And so I got her to list those things. She did serve snack, clean up from snack, organize games on the playground, lead a story time in Spanish. Then I got her to say, okay, over what period of time did you do that? How many children did you work with each time you went? What were the ages of the children? Quantifiable information. And if I could give another example real quick from a mid-career person I worked with recently. The person worked in finance, and I had been doing And projections were one of the activities that she'd been responsible for years. But one of the job ads said you needed to have experience with forecasts. So I was telling this client, you have to, find and replace all those examples of projections, replace them with forecasts. Because if you're not using the exact language of the job ad, your resume won't make it to human eyes. The robots that scan them are scanning for keywords, and even though projections and forecasts are synonyms in that context, yours wouldn't get picked up if you didn't change it. So sometimes it's just little changes like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's so unfair that those systems do those types of scanning, but that's just kind of the way of the world. You got to deal with it. Because I'm sure they miss out on some good candidates because of that.
Yeah, but they find
So
even better ones who've matched the words. You know what I mean? Like that's what we have to do. This is the problem. Our students are used to being A students, and you need to be A plus 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 to be the one that gets the job in this market.
right, it's yeah, but it's almost like meeting standardized test
Exactly.
conditions the way they're making it. So,
Yes.
but okay, well, so those are some good examples. What I was going to ask is what kind of resources people can get at your website if they go there, because I don't think, I should have put that here on the contact. Is it just, it's just darcylear.com, right?
Yeah, darcylear.com. I have a blog there where I post pretty regularly with my target is the students who are looking for jobs, but there's posts on how to ask for a good letter of recommendation, how to prepare for interviews, how to prepare your resume. I have a YouTube channel with video tips. There's a bunch of clips from workshops that I've given with language students. I have a Facebook page, Twitter feed, Pinterest board.
Yeah, so she's got, she's posting pretty valuable things on her Facebook page that I see come up. So people can go to the website and follow on Facebook or on Twitter to access those things and see how you can use some of those items to integrate into your class. Because it might, not everyone will have resources for their school to actually invite Darcy in. You can check out the website if you think your school would be able to bring her in for some facilitation workshops, but um, even if you don't have that possibility, you can glean some things from her sites, from her social media pages, and
I think, Mary, can I give one more example, or do you want to go to Q&A?
yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure we were going good on time. Go ahead, please, and then we'll take questions from people as well.
Well, just another specific example I wanted to give is something like email writing, where in English, students make all kinds of mistakes, but we can use our language courses as an opportunity to help them polish that particular set of communication skills. So, do you know how to use a subject line to give as much information as you can, put compelling information there that makes the person want to read the message and respond? Can they put a proper salutation in Spanish? Most students, if they've heard of salutations at all, use querido, querida instead of the
Mm-hmm.
more appropriate estimado, and they don't always get the right endings, gender and number endings. And again, these like tiny things that we can polish over. Same with signing off with the despedida. Do they know the word atentamente? Most students make up something related to sincerely. And then in the body of the email, are you communicating clearly? Are you should you be sending an email, or are you just saying really vague things that can't be resolved over email, like I have a couple questions, which I'm not going to tell you in the email, but I want to make an appointment with you even though I know your office hours because they're published in the syllabus. Like students send silly emails like that, and we can train them not to do that as part of the logistics of our course while explicitly reminding them that their employers will value that skill, that they are competent bilingual communicators in the bay.
Yeah, and hopefully being more explicit as you're working through those kind of activities in a class, that's going to motivate the people that are kind of like, why am I stuck taking a foreign language? That brings more to the forefront. I'm taking it for this because it really is going to be useful in the real world later. I'm not just taking it because I have to for a required credit.
Right. Well, and the parallel to standardized testing that you brought up, Mary, and now I see Marta has posted something about it as well. I think with interviews, people are tempted to say, like, I just want to go in and show them the true me. Well, if you show the GRE your true you, you'll score way lower than if you do some test prep before the GRE. It's the same with an
Yeah.
interview. You'll have an opportunity to be the real you, but you have to anticipate these commonly asked interview questions. And Anne just posted one here about what else should we know about you as an opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to talk about your language. Whatever it's an opportunity to talk about, you need to be ready to seize that opportunity by having thought about what you'll say in the interview. So you have to do your homework. You have to be prepared, even though you'd rather, in an ideal world, be able to just go in and spontaneously be the genuine. And we have a similar approach to standardized tests, I think, in this country now. Like you'd rather go in cold and
Yeah.
let it be truly standardized, but in reality, you have to prepare.
Yeah. Okay, did you want to give any more examples or should we turn over for people that have questions? And oh, and actually Anne has a question here.
I see.
If you want to take that or do you want to give another example?
Yeah, she asks, what are the most frequent questions from faculty when I talk to them during campus visits? I think faculty ask a lot of the same questions Mary did today, like how did I get going with what I'm doing and why did I get going doing it? I think I do get asked on most campuses if I do coaching for faculty because sometimes because there's so many contingent faculty out there who are maybe considering looking for something better, which is an interesting question to get. And I think a lot of times faculty don't ask this question, but they want to know, am I a competent enough professional to prepare my students for practical professional careers? Because we don't usually consider academics, traditional post-secondary,
Yeah.
and try to assure them that they are, that they can do exactly these things.
Okay, well, Annie's throwing another question out there for us. And anybody else, please feel free to type into the chat box any questions that you have. As an entrepreneur yourself, how do you think we can help our students have an entrepreneurial mindset?
A hard one. I think I was thinking about this the other day. It's so hard to mimic in the classroom environment what it is to really try to fully execute an entrepreneurial idea. But I do think that the literature on entrepreneurship is pretty true to the reality of entrepreneurial endeavors. As I'm executing things, and I think like I read about this. I've read about this. When I was teaching Spanish and entrepreneurship. So you can read a lot about it, and it does ring true. I think when you're ready to launch something, one of the best pieces of advice I read that wasn't in the theoretical literature is you have to put your actions before your thoughts. You have to get up every day and just do things to push your endeavor forward and don't let yourself start thinking about it and rationalizing it and wondering if you need to do more before you act. You have to put your actions before your thought. It was probably the best piece of advice I got last year.
Okay. Well, that's good. Anybody else out there have any questions or comments or things that they would like to add? Okay, no typing yet. Um, there, there was one question that I still had for you, Darcy, is when you go to the campus um, when you go to campuses, you typically go into one specific class, or does the campus organize like a small conference event? How does that work when you go to campus? Is it for a department? Is it for a particular faculty member that brings you in?
Usually it's for a department and they organize like a small conference event and they try to reach out to whoever the minors and majors in their constituency are. Sometimes on small campuses it's all foreign languages or all modern languages. Other campuses sometimes it's just Spanish and Portuguese or smaller language groups. And once I did go to a class, but I'd say the vast majority are department sponsored.
Uh-huh. And you said you do possibly work with students, so if teachers, wanted to share your link or anything, individual
Absolutely.
students can contact you as well.
Of course, yes, yes. That's my main constituency, I would say. Students.
Okay. And then that you kind of work between email exchanges, phone.
Yeah, that's been interesting because even with clients in Chicago, I rarely meet one on one. I almost always
Uh-huh.
do it by email, phone. You can Skype or FaceTime, and a lot of times people are looking for practice with Skype or FaceTime before they have an interview by that means. And there's an ed tech platform called Upswing where I do some tutoring that's a lot like actually what we're using now, the Adobe, where you can have a camera and you can upload documents and edit them on the site.
Oh, okay. Okay, Annie's got another good question here. And this is really true. Are you reading the question there?
Yeah, the job search information falls on deaf ears, and that's exactly why I that's one of the reasons why I felt like I had to move outside of the university context because it was giving them some of these curricular materials, excuse me, before they were ready. Most students wait until they're graduating to get their resumes put together and start applying to jobs. And like I said, most of my clients come to me after they've been frustrated for a few months on the job market and are then trying to improve things. So I feel like the solution for us is to do the languages for specific purposes like we're talking about now as skills building, fundamental skills building, as explicit strategy instruction, and letting students know these will serve you in your career and here's how. Maybe this isn't the time to work on your resume here in this Spanish entrepreneurship class.
Uh-huh. Annie's got another question. What lessons about marketing have you learned as an entrepreneur that we can convey to students?
I wish I had learned more lessons than I have about marketing. I really do. I think social media is important, but gaining traction in social media is difficult, and I honestly have not figured out how
Yeah.
to successfully market through social media. I am old school with my networking. I meet people, I'll talk to anybody. I have met great contacts for my business at the bus stop. I would say, yeah, more than once. And I get referrals now from someone that I, again, like met and now often walk to and from the L stop with. So, I think that for me, and maybe it's because I'm older, that old school telling people what you do, and not as in I am a career coach, I am a teacher, but really explicitly, I train foreign language students is my main entree into that. And I do think you have to try a lot of different avenues when you're starting out and see where you gain traction. And then sort of when you see where you gain traction, you pursue it, full speed ahead.
Yeah, because there's just so much out there now that is bombarding people to make yourself stand out is difficult, and it's exactly what students are trying to do in the job market. So it's really, marketing is applicable in so many aspects of life, and even though people sometimes, look down on the business school,
Yeah.
for just making money, marketing, you're marketing yourself all day long, every day,
Yeah. Well,
just
and
in
I think
different.
right. And you need, like branding, you talk about branding and your personal branding statement, and that can be what I
Right.
was just saying, like the answer to what do you do that isn't a profession, but rather, you know, pithy description of the services that you provide. I think that's important to marketing. But I don't feel like I've
Uh-huh.
come to the point where I can say, here's what a successful marketing campaign looks like personally.
Yeah, no, it's tough. So we got a comment from Donica. I, I just lost it. Exactly, Donica. Yeah, it's the same kind of skills Darcy's talking about. It's applicable for internships, and internships definitely are needed these days to get in as well. Linda has a remark. Yeah, career day. Yeah, is a good place to try to bring in some of these things.
Students love guest speakers. I mean, they just can't get enough of that. And if you can bring in actual professionals who tell them, and this is a lot of what I say when I go to these campus visits is students study languages with this intuitive understanding that it'll be good for their careers. And we hear these great stories from the departments and from guest speakers about these wonderful successful candidates. How do you get from where the student is to where those successful career people are? And I think that's a great question to ask at these career days. When people come to
Mm-hmm.
talk about how do they use language in your careers, well, how did you get there? How did you get from where we are sitting here in the classroom today to where you are now, a successful professional? Those tips are the juicy ones.
Uh-huh. Well, and I think sometimes too, when we bring in people for events here at UF, it's interesting if you bring in people in different stages of their careers, because I think it is easier if you bring in like a recent grad that's in a pretty good job, because they're still close enough to point out some things that maybe, the executive is, like high level already 30 years later might miss remembering some of those small details.
Right. I'm saying
All
goodbye.
right, so we got. Oh, okay. Somebody's going. Okay, Margarita, thank you for coming. Yeah, definitely. We'll keep in touch. Have a good night. Okay, so we might go ahead and close now. I don't know if anybody else has any final questions or if we're all good. Um, we've had some good comments and questions out there. Annie's typing. Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and close here. Darcy, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to all the participants. I'm getting the um, recording links figured out and hopefully getting those posts within the next week or so. So we will see you all again, hopefully in a couple weeks, or be in touch through social media. And you got Darcy's contact information and her website to check out for more resources.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.